The world was called Kharvenne Secundus, and it was, by any reasonable measure, a terrible place to die, which made it exactly the kind of place the Astra Militarum sent people to do precisely that. Ash-choked jungles, skies the color of an old bruise, a war against something in the undergrowth that nobody had properly identified yet, and everybody already hated. Commissar Alea Van Hoff stood at the edge of the tree line with her sidearm holstered and her cap pulled low, watching the 118th Kharvenne rifles dig in for a night none of them were likely to enjoy. She was young for a commissar, 31, sharp-jawed, with the kind of stillness that made veteran sergeants nervous. She had shot 2 deserters in her first month with the regiment. She had not enjoyed it. She had done it anyway, because that was the job, and the job did not care what she enjoyed. Beside her, taking up roughly the space of a small ground car, stood Grud. Grud was an ogrin, 7.5 feet of slab muscle and good intentions, carrying a ripper gun that most men would have needed both arms and a support brace to lift, and wearing, over his flak armor, a strip of red cloth tied at the shoulder. Van Hoff's own spare sash, given to him 8 months ago, after a battle neither of them talked about much. "Commissar," Grud said, in the slow, careful way Ogrin spoke, like a man walking across ice he wasn't sure would hold. "Bugs in the trees. Grud smells them." "I believe you," Van Hoff said. And she did. Grud's nose had saved the regiment's collective life on at least 3 occasions, and his judgment on matters of smelling things that wanted to kill them was considerably better than most officers' judgment on matters of anything at all. "Besemmerjug he besting we ubisorein hem and jo wotwees nile laza ferelito." As muscle, as a blunt instrument, as a resource to be pointed at problems too large for lasguns, nobody had expected loyalty out of the arrangement. Ogrin's was simple, the briefing note said. Loyal to whoever fed them and didn't shout too much. Interchangeable, more or less, one enormous grey-skinned soldier for another. The briefing notes were wrong, though it took Van Hoff a while to work out exactly how. It started small. Grud, remembering, unprompted, that she took her recaf without sugar, a detail she'd mentioned exactly once, in passing, during a supply briefing he technically hadn't needed to attend. Grud, standing outside her tent at night, not because he'd been ordered to, but because, as he put it, with the plain honesty Ogrin seemed constitutionally incapable of avoiding, someone should. It became less small, the day the hive spawn came up out of the river mud outside Kharvenne's second city, and half the company broke and ran, and Van Hoff, following the commissariat's oldest and least forgiving law, drew her sidearm on the first man through the line. Grud stepped in front of her. Not against her. In front of her. Between her and the running men. His enormous back to her sidearm, his ripper gun already turning toward the true enemy, still climbing out of the mud behind them. "Grud," she said, very carefully, because pointing a weapon at an ogrin who had decided to disagree with you was a genuinely bad idea, and shooting through him even worse. "Step aside." "No, Commissar." He didn't turn around. "They're scared. Scared runs." Grud knows scared. A pause, the ripper gun's mechanism clicking as he armed it fully. Bugs is worse than scared men. Grud deals with bugs, you deal with scared men after. Alive men you can still shout at. It was, Van Hoff would reflect later, possibly the most tactically and morally sound argument she had ever heard delivered by anyone, of any rank, in her entire career. She held her fire. Grud turned back to the tree line and became, for the next 4 minutes, something closer to a natural disaster than a soldier, a wall of muscle and cordite that bought the fleeing men time to remember their courage and come back with it. By the time the hive spawn broke, 6 of them lay dead at Grud's feet, and Grud himself was bleeding from a gash across his shoulder that would have put a lesser man in a Medicae tent for a month. He did not go to the Medicae tent. He went and stood outside Van Hoff's command post instead, as usual, because, as he explained, when she found him and ordered him, twice, to get the wound seen to, someone should. Despise that was 8 months ago. The sash on his shoulder was from the following week, offered wordlessly, accepted the same way. Neither of them had ever discussed what it meant. Ogrin's, the manuals insisted, did not form complex attachments. Grud, in defiance of every manual ever printed, had apparently formed one anyway, and aimed it at her with the single-minded devotion of a compass needle finding north. Van Hoff had stopped questioning it somewhere around month 3. It was easier, and it was true. And on a world like Kar,